Hi, I'm Lynn Langett, and in this presentation I'm going to introduce you to Approval Tests, which is an open source unit testing library. In this presentation I'm going to talk about what approval tests are, why you might use them, and show you through demos how to use them. So let's get started. So approval tests are a great addition to your set of testing tools in addition to the standard asserts and other types of tools that you might use to run tests and to look at the results of tests. Approval tests are written around the idea of a golden master. So you'll see as we go through, and in this screenshot I've actually got a WPF application here, that there'll be two serialized versions of the output of the object that you're testing. And in this particular case I have it, like I said, a WPF form, and you'll get a file that's named received, and then you'll create a file that's named approved, and that's going to be the golden master or your correct version of the object or set of objects that you're wanting to test. This is a really important paradigm to understand as you're deciding whether and how to work with approval tests, this idea of the golden master or the approved file. Approval tests is available in many different languages and versions. Most of my demonstrations are going to be around the versions that I actually use in different implementations. So to that end, I'm going to start with C# demos using Visual Studio 2012. You can get the source code because this is an open source project and look at it or suggest changes to it. But if you just want to work with the library, the easiest way to do that is to go to NuGet and go to Approval Tests within Visual Studio and bring it down for your particular project. So you just search on Approval Tests. If you are interested in getting the source code, it's available on GitHub for most of the major languages. So once you decide whether you want the source code or just the libraries, you're going to get those particular files, and then you're going to make them a part of your project, and you'll probably want to work with some diff tools. You'll see in the demonstration why it makes approval tests more useful. So that being said, let's get started. So I'm inside of Visual Studio 2012 and I've created a console application. And you can see inside of here that on the using declarations up at the top I have three different approval test declarations: approval test reporters, and approval test combinations, which is a different type of approval test. To get the basic functionality, as I said, you would go to your tools, and then you would go to your NuGet section and bring it in. Now I've already done that, so I've got multiple projects here, two different types of projects, and if I right click on the solution and I go to Manage NuGet Packages, alright, so once you have it associated via NuGet, then of course in the references, if I open this up, you're going to see that I have approval tests and approval utilities, and that's for both of my projects. So you're probably wondering how you use approvals. Now when we first get started, you'll see that really they're very, very similar to using traditional unit testing tools and libraries, specifically asserts. But as we go through the demos and through the talk, you'll see why approval tests are different than asserts and when you might want to use them rather than asserts. They're really a supplement. But first let's look at the mechanics. So inside of the C# class file here, I have a decorator for test class and I have a decorator for test method. And I have a simple method here setting up a variable, a string variable for hello, and rather than calling an assert, I simply call approvals.verify, and then I pass in that particular value. Now if you take a look, there's many different method overloads which you'll discover as you work with the library. Sometimes there's more expressiveness inside of here, but the basic mechanics is approvals.verify. Then we'll go ahead and we'll run our test, and we'll see, of course, the test will fail. And if I look at why this test failed and drill in, you'll see that it failed because it was looking for that golden master. Now if I refresh over on the right side, you'll see that I do have a received file which has received this particular object. Now the simplest possible thing to do is just rename. So if I go inside of here and I right click and I rename this to the approved, which makes that the golden master, and now I rerun this test, you'll see that the test will pass. Now you might be wondering, with which test running frameworks approval test works, or if there's a particular test running framework. It's really designed as something that will plug into all the major test running frameworks. Inside of here I'm just using MS Test. So you'll see in this second test on line 28 here that I've added a use reporter, and I'm calling a diff reporter. Now again, this is a utility library. It hooks into the different tools that you might already be using. In the case of Visual Studio 2012, there is a file diff reporter that's included. So you'll see inside of here where I want to take this string, hello reporter, and I want to verify this, I just go ahead and bring it up. And of course it's going to fail because I don't have a golden master, and it opens in the file diff tool. Now, if I want to just take what I've seen here and make this my golden master, then I'm going to go ahead and copy that, being careful not to put the extra space in because otherwise it won't match, and then paste it, and just checking to make sure that the space is not there. Now I'm going to save it, and that's going to save it as the approved file. There's many different ways to automate taking the output of the received file and making it approved, and the creators of approval tests have done more videos on this, but simplest possible way, you can just copy it over, and of course now I have the golden master, so if I rerun this test, it's going to pass. And there it passes. Now this is a key concept of approval tests, that when the test passes, you don't have more information given back to you. You don't need to see a comparison against what you got in the golden master because it passed. So if I change this and just put another, change the string, of course it will fail, and then it's going to open in the diff tool and it's going to show me very granularly what caused that failure. So it shows me there what caused the failure. So now let's look at something more complicated. So now we're going to just look at, in this next test, testing the simple word count. So we've got a list, hello world of approval tests, and we've got another step in our setup. We're going to call list.split on the space. And then for the approval, we want to verify the length of the words. Of course, it's going to fail initially. And we've got 5, so if 5 is our golden master, we can just put that in, making sure there's no space, save it, close it, rerun it, there's the received, and there's what we got. So we must have had an extra space in there. So now if we wanted to set that as the correct one, we would simply just say that that is correct, get rid of this, and then if we wanted to make a change and see what that looked like, and here is more. Of course now this should fail, and it does fail, and it shows us that we now have 9 words rather than 5. Now in this next test, what we're doing is we've got an array, and in the array we have an array of strings, and what we're doing here is we're using not verify, but we're using verify all. Now you can see there's 9 different overloads against verify all. What we've done is we've taken the object, and then we're using a lambda expression, and we're making more expressive output. This is a great capability of approval tests that helps in situations where you really want to have more readable test output. So let me show you what this looks like by running this test. And you can see now we have a more interesting output telling us which word is which and numbering the words, which if you had a very complex object to validate would be more useful than working with simpler testing mechanisms. You might see in line 42 here we did a verify all to verify an array. What if we wanted to verify multiple arrays? So you can see we've got the diff reporter, we're calling this test combination, and we have 3 arrays of ints here. Now what we want to do is we want to verify all possible combinations, so we have a convenient method which will do that. Now we can work with that method in 2 different ways. We can call the method that's going to operate on the arrays, and to me that's sort of the simplest way to understand that, so I put both of them in here. So you can see multiply, and we're just multiplying all the possible values. Or you can use the lambda syntax and not write that method separately, which is what I've got here commented out. So let's first run this, and you can see that we get a large number of results. Do you know how many? We have 1,000 different results. So if this is correct, this would be test combination. Then of course we can make this our golden master by just saying test combination to make this one our golden master. Now, here's where it really gets interesting. If I go and I change some of these numbers of the array, let's see what our feedback looks like, because we know it's going to fail because we have a golden master. But let's see what our diff tool tells us now. And we can see a very, very useful level of granularity. You can see over to the right, and if I scroll up and down, just how granular this becomes. And I want you to take a minute and think about if you were to test this using less sophisticated tools like regular asserts, how would you do that? All right, another interesting aspect of approval tests is that there are different types of reporters. Now this example is deliberately simple, but I think you'll get the point. You can see on line 61 that on your use reporter you have a diff reporter and a file launcher reporter. And the type of string that we have here is an HTML string, and in fact we're calling verify HTML. And just to give you some window into the different types of things that you can verify, if I bring this up, you can see you can verify a file, a binary file, or an XML as well. So let's run this and let's see what happens in terms of the output, because of course we know that it will fail when multiple reporters are called. And you can see you have the source HTML, but you can also see that if I click down here on Internet Explorer, that this renders as a web page. Of course, just so that we can understand all the things that I showed, this idea of the golden master is manifested with files that are named received or approved. Approved is the golden master. Now there are a large number of reporters that are supported, and it's very easy to extend the library. It's about 3 lines of code. So if you have a particular reporter that you like, a diff tool, just again reach out to the creators and they can pair program with you and extend it. One of the reporters I want to call out, because we always get a lot of questions, is the quiet reporter. This is used when you want to use approval tests with a CI process, because you don't want the diff tools to open, you want them to log. So quiet reporter is specifically designed for that scenario. We saw some of the complex objects, not all of them, but some of them, the arrays of arrays. We looked at arrays and the richness of the output. We looked at combinations, and we looked at the different method, verify all combinations. So in the next section, we're going to look at testing even more complex objects, testing GUIs. So I'm going to take a really simple scenario just to get us started, and I'm going to take a WinForm. This works with WPF, it works with Silverlight, it works with all the major sort of GUIs in the .NET side, and the Java side it works with JPanels and things like that. So we've got a really simple form, and then to use approvals, we're just going to use approval tests, reporters, and approval test.winforms. And again, to show you some of the objects that you can test, notice that we have WinForms, we have WPF, we have XML, we have this group for SQL Server reports, which are RDLC reports, all kinds of complex objects in here, HTML, so on and so forth. Okay, so for my demo, I actually installed Tortoise Diff. Because this is a WinForm, the output here, the binary serialization, is going to be a graphics file. So rather than the text diff tool, which comes with Visual Studio, I actually installed Tortoise Diff. So another thing that's a little different in this demo is rather than putting the reporter attribute declaration on each method, I put it at the level of the class, because I just want the diff reporter, which in this case will be Tortoise Diff, to open for each and every test in this particular file. You can also put this at the level of the assembly if that works better for you. So inside of here I have just first a simple form. So here's my setup, hello WinForm, and instead of passing in the primitive, now you pass in the WinForm. So let me show you what that looks like. Of course it's going to fail on the first render, but now it opens in Tortoise Diff. So if I looked at the received, of course I would have this. This is just opening in a graphics renderer here. If I wanted to look at the approved, I would have nothing because I haven't approved anything. So just like before, I would just right click and delete it and say OK, and then I would rename this and call it the approved, and that'll make my golden master. Notice the extension is a PNG file. And now if I rerun it, my diff tool is not going to open because it will pass. And there's my WinForm passed. All right, so that has some functionality, but additional pieces of functionality that are interesting is in addition to approving a form, you can approve a control. So we had a button on there, so let's take a look and show you. Here's the setup, verify my form.count button. All the public objects, and you do have to make them public, will become available. So there's my button, click to add one. And now if I make a change to the form, and save it, and I make a change to the form and I rerun it, and now you can see the differences. Now I can just look at them, or I can overlay and I can blend alpha to see the difference. Now WPF has a little bit of weird rendering there. All right, now what about the state of the button, which now passes that test. Now of course, and it doesn't open the diff tool. Now if I give it a new value, I'm simulating model view controller here in a very, very simple way. And you can see this is 98 now. So why test? The bottom line is the more that you can test, generally the higher quality the code is. It's very, very rarely that we say we've tested too much. So it's all about code quality. So more powerful tools result in easier testing, which results in better quality code. And again, there's whole discussions around TDD and BDD. But what it really comes down to is this idea of correctly capturing the requirements in languages and methods that are more natural for us. Drawing on a whiteboard, writing in English. Translating that into something that's very testable, testing the result, and then verifying. And doing it at the smallest level of granularity that's practical. So whether that's TDD or whether that's BDD, approval tests fit with both types of scenarios. Approval tests don't replace asserts. For simple primitives, I still use asserts, and so do the people that created approval tests. They're just another library in a developer's testing toolkit. So I said in the beginning of the presentation that approval tests is available in many languages. Another language that I use approval tests in is Java, and I'm not the only one. We've done some work with a young student who is studying computer science at university, and as she's learning, we worked with her in several different domains. So she also works with us in our Teaching Kids Programming nonprofit. Genevieve L'Esperance decided to make a little video about getting started with approval tests in Java. So I'll go ahead and link that video here. It takes about 3 minutes. So if you're a Java programmer, you can see the steps to get set up. So I'll link that here. So the scenario is Mapreduce on Hadoop. So this will be shown in Java, running with a Hadoop distribution, CDH4 on Linux on a VM, and using an extension of approval test to test the Mapreduce process. So this isn't designed to teach you Mapreduce, so I'll just kind of give you a high level on it if you're not familiar. The idea is that it's a two-part kind of an ETL-like job against massively distributable data. So in the map portion, there's an algorithm that runs on n number of nodes and produces an output of a key value set of pairs. And then the mapper outputs are aggregated on a subset of the number of nodes, which are called the reducer nodes, and some subsequent processing is done. So map and reduce. So there's three things to look at in Mapreduce, which is the mapper, the reducer, and Mapreduce itself in terms of output. And that's how the extension to approval test was written. So let's dive in to a demo so that we can understand how that works. So the first thing is I'm working on Eclipse on CentOS here, using Java, and you'd have to bring down the most current release of approval tests. And you should have watched Genevieve's video here previously to understand the process to go get it and bring it down. So I just showed you it needs to be on the build path. Then inside of our particular project, we've got files to represent the different processes. Now, for this to work, there's a couple different things to happen. First of all, you have to have your mapper, your reducer, and your driver, and that's just basic Mapreduce. So the algorithm to do the map, to do the reduce, and then to run the job, which is the Mapreduce process. Now, if you were going to test this traditionally, then you'd have another test class using asserts, and I just threw this into the project so that you can see what that would look like. Now, to use approval tests, you can just use approval tests directly against the map and reduce processes, but in working with the creators of approval tests, we found that a code optimization was to use the Smart Stub Mapper and Smart Stub Reducer to make the actual test code itself more concise. So I'm going to take you through that process as well. So let's first look at the Stub Mapper. So you can see you got the Stub Mapper, which extends Mapreduce, which implements the mapper using the Hadoop types of a long writable and a text, outputting text in an int writable. And the map process itself, and then it splits the words on spaces. Well, I guess it's not classic in that it does a little bit different manipulation, but it works with a group of words, which is usually like a book or a text of a book. In our case, we're making a little bit smaller input, but it's a group of words and does some process. So you can see in there you've got the count of the words, and then you're going to output the words, and then you're going to output them as key value pairs. So the second part of this is taking that input and then reducing that input and taking in the text and taking the int writable and then outputting the text in a double writable. And what you're doing is you're taking the average, you're calculating the average that the letter occurs. So you can see there's the calculation there in the particular words, which is a lot to explain in words. And one of the interesting things about working with Mapreduce and approval tests is when you see the richness of the output, it helps you to understand what the algorithm is actually doing. Just for completeness, I'll show you the Stub Driver. So this is standard Mapreduce code, so you got a runner and basically your job config, and this opens up the mapper and the reducer. Okay, and then once you set up your run method, then the next thing that you do is that you then just basically run your job. So that's the mechanics behind here. Now, in terms of approval tests, what you're going to work with is Hadoop version 2 approvals. This is for the new Mapreduce API. And then you're going to have 3 different tests inside of here. Notice we're using a JUnit reporter. So this is going to be a diff reporter that comes in this environment. And we're going to start by testing the mapper. So we're going to pass in Hello World Llewellyn, and it is fun. Passing in the Smart Stub Mapper, which is a wrapper, basically that makes this code more concise so we don't have to put in all the type information, and then pass in a value of 1. Notice the different methods that we have that we can work with here. We have verify mapping, verify reducing, or verify Mapreduce, and they're designed to work with these smart objects. So inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and just click on this method, and I'm going to click on the test runner. And of course, it's going to fail because I don't have a golden master. And if I want to see more detailed information, you can see Hello World Llewellyn, it is fun. So the mapper is saying that the first word starts with H, it has 5 letters. The second word starts with L, has 9, so on and so forth. And you can see the output is case sensitive. So if we wanted to play around with this, we could just say, and it is really fun. And then we could rerun this. And now we can see the richness of the output. We can see exactly what's happening. Similarly, if we want to test the whole process, we can go down to the Mapreduce. Now we're passing in something a little bit different here. Hi, Hello World Llewellyn. We'll go ahead and we'll test this. And we can see hi, hello world Llewellyn, and there's the first word is H with one letter, the second word is H with two letters, so on and so forth. And we can see the reduce process looks at the percentage of words that start with H, with L, and with W. So of course we can play around with this and we can just say hi, hello. We can rerun this. And we can very quickly and easily see smart output. Now if we wanted to approve, let me just run this reduce one. Inside of here I could just copy this, open up a terminal window, paste it in, which this is using a type of reporter that's a clipboard reporter. It's doing a rename. And then if I reran this test, I now have a golden master. So that test is going to pass. And I can always verify that by looking back at my Package Explorer and refreshing. And I can see all my various masters. And again, I would be getting rid of my received files and checking in my approved file. And tell you where you can get more resources. So ApprovalTest.com is a blog on approval tests. The two guys that are the primary authors, although there have been a lot of contributors from all over the world, are Llewellyn Falco and Dan Gilkerson. Llewellyn has created a series of 20 YouTube videos on his use of approval tests with .NET objects, so that's a really useful place to go. Here's a picture of what Llewellyn and Dan look like. And let me show you a couple of web resources as well. So here's source code on GitHub for the various languages, and you can see it's also available in Ruby if you're interested in that. Here's the NuGet gallery. Here's the samples from this presentation and another presentation Woody Zuhl and I did at Agile 2012. So if you're interested in the source code, you can go to my GitHub repository on this. And here is Llewellyn's YouTube channel. And you can see that he has a playlist on approval tests in .NET. So the very last thing I want to close with here is one of the places that both Llewellyn and I have used approval tests quite extensively is in the nonprofit that we run together called Teaching Kids Programming. For our nonprofit, our primary output is a series of free and open source courseware to introduce children ages 10 and up to programming. And we've written the library now in several different languages, and we've used approval tests all along the way, actually, which has been kind of an interesting journey. So the library is written in Small Basic, it's written in Java, and there's a new release coming out soon through Pluralsight on C#. So just another sort of thing that we do, but it's also something that we use approval tests quite extensively on. So if you're interested in improving your unit testing and your testing capability, try out approval tests. Let me bring this back up to the beginning here. And we're very, very interested in hearing your feedback. Llewellyn monitors Twitter for the hashtag approval tests, and he answers very, very frequently. We'd love to hear how this helps you write better and more tests. Thanks for your time, and this is Lynn Langett for Approval Tests.